Hi, my name is Luke, and I'm filming this video for a variety of reasons. I think one of the main ones is that I communicate a lot in kind of like by talking to myself, basically. And I figured the best way to tell the story is by doing just that and filming myself talk to myself. So it's more of a raw, honest train of thought. And yeah, just to be completely blunt and straightforward, this is the story of how I overcame an addiction to internet pornography. And I promised myself back in a couple of years ago that if I was ever somehow free of this addiction, that was like the darkest thing I could imagine at the time, and like this prison, that if I was free, I would turn around and help other people out too. I'd let the rope down and greet people and as they're coming out of the well as well. So without further ado, I figure I might as well explain a little bit of my story to give some background information. So basically, story goes, my name is Luke, if I haven't already introduced myself. I was raised in big family, happy family. I had a great childhood. Like I said, great friends, and ultimately I felt like my life was very blessed to the point in which I can't really credit many things as issues in my life growing up. There's small things like not having the Lego set you wanted, but pretty privileged upbringing as far as childhoods go, to the point in which I was introduced to internet pornography in about it was either 8th or ninth grade in, I think it was, can't remember specifically where it was, but I definitely knew what it was before I had seen it. But upon being shown it for the first time and realizing that it was this like dopamine hit that people would interact with, that's where I developed an addiction at the beginning. And I'm sure if you're watching this video, I'm sure you're familiar with what internet pornography is. It makes up a ridiculous amount of the internet. It's this massive industry that I think it's bigger than like the NHL, the NBA, all those other industries combined. It just rakes in profit. Sorry, that's a B. But yeah, I was introduced to it at a pretty young age, and although I guess not that young, because it's being pushed on kids now these days, which is horrible. But yeah, I was introduced to it, and I developed an addiction pretty early on. And the funny part is that I love my parents, and they did their best to protect me from a lot of things in life. But I somehow managed to find this and get addicted to it, while having restrictions, while having no internet, unfiltered internet access, no social media at the time. Yeah, like barely, like no phones in your room, the whole ordeal, and yet I still found a way to be entrapped and ensnared in this. And the way I'm wired is that I kind of like to have conversations in long form talks with other people, but not all the time, just like one good conversation, then I'm good for 3 days. But the problem was, I felt like with this, I couldn't talk about this addiction with a lot of people. And yeah, that really hurt me, because of the fact that this was an addiction that wasn't discussed as much, and if it was kind of blown off. I felt like a lot of other sins and issues that people discuss are on the verge of like, oh yeah, man, I lied to you, I'm sorry. Or stealing's a bit more serious, but when it comes to porn and ultimately an addiction to masturbation, those are things that, especially with guys kind of suck at talking about serious things or personal things or their emotions. So putting all those issues together, I hated the period of my life when I was most addicted to porn, because I could not talk to people. I felt demasculated. I didn't trust myself. I couldn't look anyone in the eye, to be completely honest. And it just crushed my life. And I told myself, everyone knows, oh, never again, never again. And then you keep giving in. And there'd be periods where I would like write, on my hand, like, no, you're not going to do it this time. And I'd really believe it. And then like 5 hours later, I'd fall. And that was just kind of the most depressing thing, to be honest. But I did break out. And that's why I'm making this video. So yeah, for retrospect, I was, I was average teenage kid, still kind of am to a degree, even though I'm in my 20s. But, playing video games, hanging out with friends, watching movies, played high school sports, the usual. But I always kind of had like an addictive personality where I would find something and then I would kind of like binge it to a degree that was unhealthy. And it was just recently I was listening to a podcast that was talking about the dangers of binging, but also how like the dopamine that you get from a binge, whether it's food, whether it's video games, movies, pornography, any of these things, that you really only enjoy like the first 10% of it. And then after that, you kind of are just chasing that initial high, that first primary exposure. And that like basically summed up my entire relationship with pornography, because upon being exposed to it and discovering the dopamine hit, the massive surge of, it's like what, oxytocin or whatever dopamine chemical thing hits you, Andrew Huberman style. Like the first year or so, all of a sudden, like 50% of the population opened up in my mind as this massive source of dopamine. And it really just changed the way I viewed everyone, primarily women too, but just like my relationship with other people, my outlook on how people functioned in life was really, really cynical. Because at the end of the day, I just boil it down to, okay, yeah, well, everyone is addicted to this, or this is just how society works. And it took the joy out of life. If I could describe it, I'd say it was like viewing the world through black and white, which was not fun. And I don't really have any words to say other than it was just a very dark time. And the worst part was the hopelessness that came from it, because I truly believed that there was no way out. I would deal with it for the rest of my life. And that got to the point where it was like, I would get desperate. I'd lock my phone in a safe for a week at a time to make sure I didn't give in. And I would tell myself, like I said, I would write on my hand. I'd do dumb stuff. But I was pretty desperate to be free from this. And it wasn't until 2020 fall or 2021. I think it was 2020 in the fall. Yeah, that's that. About, no, it was September. No, it was October. It was October 30th. I was going back and forth. I had moved up to college, but I was going back and forth in my mind about whether I should keep fighting or not. And I ultimately came to the decision that I would keep fighting, but I would try fighting differently. And I wouldn't worry about the outcome. I didn't purposely set in my mind to set a 3-year streak. I didn't try and focus on the days. There was a whole lot of things that I'm realizing in retrospect were good calls, but ultimately it was God's will and his provision that I was able to walk out of this. And I didn't even realize it at the time. But starting in November of 2020, I was, if you're familiar with the term No Nut November, it's a thing where guys all joke that they can't, look at things or jack off during the month of November. And I told myself that I was going to complete the challenge. And the funny part is that I didn't have any self-control or self-will at the time. I was obese at the time, about like 260 pounds. And I remember saying that, like, all right, if I can do this one thing, if I can just go this month, I'll have some sort of credibility to myself. I could trust myself. And I was also trying to do like a calorie deficit at the time, which in retrospect actually really did help this a lot, because of the fact that I was cutting off a lot of food in my life, which lowered my testosterone, which did lower my drive and helped me achieve a pretty small streak at the beginning. But ultimately, it was the daily discipline of reading my Bible and being close to God and taking my faith seriously for the first time that brought me out. And I didn't even realize it at first. I just realized that I was having a streak and I wasn't thinking about it at the time. So, and I realized too, actually later now that I think about it, one of the primary battles that I had always struggled with was the mental discipline to say no, because it was always an attack to a degree that, it was like if you're alone, like the David situation in the Bible where he doesn't go off to war. I felt like most times in my life where it became an opportunity, or if I found a loophole in my restrictions, whatnot, whenever it became an opportunity, I would take it, even though I had told myself an hour before that I wouldn't, which was fun. And I realized at that point that I needed to stop having the conversation of whether I was or wasn't going to do it, which is tough because that conversation kind of just happens in your head by itself because of the male hormone balance and like your monkey brain that tells you what it wants, and it wants it now, and you're chasing it because I think there's studies too that talk about like a lot of other things. Same thing with like video game addictions, but a lot of other things in life lose their comparative dopamine compared to the massive dumps of things you get from really stimulating activity. So I don't know where I was going with that, but the point being said, a concept came to me in about the first 3 weeks of my first streak of purity, and it was a concept of visualizing what the reason was for me doing it. It wasn't to stand on top of a month and be like, all right, I did it, now I can give back into the addiction and start all over again. But ultimately, the reason why I was doing all this is because I had a goal, and the goal was to win. The goal was to be free of it and to never look back and pretend like it had never been an issue in my life. Not like it had never been an issue, but it was not continuing to be an issue in my life, and I wouldn't be plagued or haunted by it anymore. And that's where the phrase that has been central to my life and a lot of the people's lives that I've shared this with, but it's the phrase that it cannot be an option in your mind. The phrase specifically not an option is what I refer to it as, and it's a simple phrase. It's something that you repeat to yourself, and you ultimately have to believe it at the end of the day, because if you don't, and it becomes even an option in your head, you enter into the territory of battling whether you're going to do it or not do it. And I've always lost that battle, to be completely honest with you. And so the degree at which you can walk away from this is the degree at which you can believe yourself and what you say about your actions in the future. So there's a lot of nuances to this that I've discovered over the last 3 years that have really helped, and I'll probably get into those in other videos or things like that. But yeah, like it's not about counting days. That's the worst possible thing, because counting a day is dumb. It's like you can only check it off at the end of the day. There's no satisfaction. Even if you set a goal, then you reach the end of the goal and it's like, well, I might as well give in now because, I reached my goal. I got the reward. Yeah, I don't even think restrictions work ultimately, because that kind of creates a game where you're trying to game the system and find a loophole, and it becomes this opportunity mindset where you're trying to find a way to get the dopamine hit, which is like hunting to a degree. You have to restructure how your mind thinks about this addiction. And I'll even get into a little bit of the fact that it's two separate addictions. There's an addiction to the visual component, and then there's a biological addiction. And as men, we're wired for both. Men are naturally wired to observe and admire the female body in a way that women are not generally wired that way. And that is a good thing. Not a good thing in excess or outside of marriage or in a lustful way. So that's one thing. But upon giving into that addiction, that also feeds into the first addiction, which is the biological addiction, and that men are naturally designed to release, to put it lightly, every 72 hours. And that creates a vicious cycle once you start giving in and satisfying that cycle and desire, and you awaken that urge, because then your body tries to find a way. And if you're a guy, it's like, okay, you do 1 or 2 days clean, and then day 3, day 4, day 5, it really starts getting hard, even though you've been good, you've been like not looking at girls or anything like that. And that is because of the fact that this is your body's natural cycle. it's kind of it's sucky, but it's also cool because you can predict when it's going to be a tough battle. And ultimately your body does have a way to naturally release, which I won't get into for sake of conversation topics, but you can break free from that 72-hour cycle. I've done it personally. And yeah, the whole idea, like I said, I'm boiling it back down to the simple topic of not being an option in your mind will take you out of the battlefield of should I do it, should I not do it, and it will put you in this status of not thinking about it at all because you spend so little time debating it in your mind. And that's hard to reach. Honestly, short of God's grace, there's no way I could have achieved that myself or understood it. And honestly, I feel like that strategy was given to me by God. I don't know. It's I really can't even explain it or understand it well enough, but I know that specific simple phrase that I repeated to myself, like, I can't even count how many times I said that to myself in those first couple weeks. And even after then, it was like, all right, I finished November, and I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm free. And then I was like, could I give back in? Could I just, could I just cave? Because I had done it now. And I was like, maybe it won't be addictive if I give back into it. But I was thinking in my mind, it was still like, it's not an option, because the only option is winning. That's why I started the entire journey. yeah, I have a list of things that I wrote about here that like I've learned along the way that I'll try and share, possibly over the course of several videos. But one of the big things too is consistency, over like a specific goal, and that your goal is not to win a weekend and then be free because you won the weekend and you rewarded yourself now that you've been free on, Monday or Tuesday to relapse. But the goal is consistency and mental fortitude, honestly, to have the strength to say it's not an option whenever it is tempted or introduced into your mind, and then also the discipline to pursue God and also satisfy your body's natural desires to get up, to move. You have testosterone and dopamine and adrenaline and all these other things that work together to get you out of bed and moving. I think it's kind of dumb that, like, to be completely honest with you, no, not even to be, I don't know why I say that, because that implies that I'm not already honest. We worked, like 200 years ago, we only worked with our bodies and we barely used our brains. Like, education was for like the rich people, and you would work all day, get home, relax, and then you would talk or whatever, but you wouldn't really use your body because that was how you made money. You worked using your entire body most of the day. And now we flipped it, and now you don't use your body at all, and you use your mind all day. And then you wonder why at the end of the day you give into things you shouldn't, like junk food, entertainment, pornography, and all those things. It's because your mind's so tired out. If I don't know, this is like getting into my philosophy on exercise and stuff like that, but you should use your body to prompt your mind, because the way your body produces or even calls for your brain to produce more hormones of certain things, that will then help your mental state. It's the same reason why people like cold plunges, because cold plunges increase dopamine, because your body like starts heating up or warming. I don't even understand it. But point being said, yeah, it's going to come from discipline. It's going to come from simplifying the task. This isn't going to be complicated. You really do have to believe the fact that this is something that you don't want to worry about anymore, because the goal is to not think about it. And if you can not think about it, then you win, because then it's not an issue anymore. And I can confidently say that there have been months, if not a year at a time, that I've never thought about it, which has been incredible. Like, people have mentioned it sometimes, and I'm like, yeah, that sucks. I'm glad I don't struggle with that, and I've been free. And I would, to be completely honest, after that first streak that I talked about, I did relapse 263 days later, which was for a lot of reasons. I will say, guess what I did that day? I didn't do anything. I was in bed the entire day or playing video games the entire day. And at the end of the day, I decided to give in because I wasn't thinking. I didn't tell myself that it wasn't an option. And look what happened. And I have been tempted since then. But I stopped counting days, to be completely honest with you, because that, like I said, created this toxic mindset, which I'll try to explain or work out in concepts in, like I said, probably other videos, which means if I'm saying this that often, that means I probably have to make more videos. But yeah, counting days, not good. And the goal is to forget about it by making it not an option, because that is something that the monkey brain in you will understand when you're tempted, and ultimately pursuing God despite the temptations and things in your life, and finding redemption through him and the Son that he sent to die for your sins, Jesus Christ. That is the only way you're going to have the courage to stand up, because we both know, like, you can tell yourself no, and then you give in later. And it's always like, what's different? That's the great question after each time you give in. What's going to be different this next time? A great strategy is to write down the pattern of actions that you did 1 hour prior to giving in, because that will just show you what are triggers. A lot of times for me, it was food. Like I said, I was not at a healthy BMI at this time when I was most heavily addicted to it. And I think there was a correlation there. But my lack of restraint around food also tied into my lack of restraint around pornography and, yeah, just self-pleasure, all of the things. So, and then lastly, the last thing I want to touch on here is why. Why would you do this? And there's a lot of reasons. I personally believe that our culture, and young men in particular, are under one of the heaviest attacks that have ever been seen, because of the fact of how pervasive it is in society for young men these days. And that on this little thing, my phone, I'm not going to touch it because I'm recording with it, but on the phone is promoted some of the most chemically addictive and compelling things you could find, along with the food, along with the culture, along with the music. There's so many things that are thrown at you But ultimately, it's to debilitate you, to make you without self-will, to make you weak-spined, whatever it is, strong-willed, I don't know the phrase, but it's to make you weak and to make you rely on the government or on female validation or on anything except your own personal beliefs and self-will. And I personally believe that is to draw you away from God and to make you a robot, to make you give in to all your carnal pleasures and everything else you want in life. So you have to fight back, and the way you have to fight back is by denying yourself, by picking up your cross, but also believing in your self-will and your self-confidence to do what you say you're going to do, which is discipline. And that why will transform other areas of your life too. I took the confidence that I gained from my initial streak with purity and extrapolated it to a lot of other areas of my life where I believed, like, like that impossible feeling of I'm just not a blank person because I'll never be blank, or I'm not wired this way. I applied that to a lot of areas in my life that I believed that for a very long time, and I changed it. And I don't say it was like, oh, because purity gave me confidence, something like that. I say it was because I realized there was a switch in my mind of that is possible. And that's ultimately hope. That's all it is. Like, hope is a vision of the things in the future that are not quite yet seen. It's kind of like what faith is, but it's excitement about the future. And the hope that came from being free from pornography transformed my life, because now I can see things with like clean hands, a pure heart, clean eyes. There's a verse in the Bible that talks about like whatever your eyes see affects the heart, and if the eyes are seeing darkness, then your heart's full of darkness. And versus being clear and full of light and walking with a pure heart, I enjoy life so much more. Life is colorful again, and there's like this joy that I haven't had since being a kid. And I thank God every single day for that, because the enemy had something different planned for my life. And yeah, even just remembering now where I was at, I would wake up at 11 a.m., play video games, watch anime, Netflix, whatever, all day, just eat a bunch of junk food, stay up late, close the laptop, turn off the gaming PC at 3 a.m. and rinse and repeat. I would do that for a long period of life. And that was COVID, sure. Like, you can blame COVID. But I could definitely be in that situation right now. Except God had a plan for my life, and I can't even get into the argument of like whether he reached out to me first or I reached out to him first. I know that through pursuing him, I'm going to move my phone, so careful for this sound. Through reading this is a Holy Bible, NIV. Through reading this consistently every day, my life completely changed, and I have hope and I have a vision for the future. I'm excited for what God has in store for me, and ultimately it all came from the realization of reframing my mind around what I wanted, and specifically what I wanted out of my relationship with pornography and the other addictions I had in my life. That there was a goal. I had a clear goal of what it was. The goal was to win, to not think about it anymore, and I had a very strong reason why. And once those two things were framed, the smaller stepping blocks, all the like, it's not an option, and don't put your phone next to your bed at night, all those other things, like, they added on. And it's for each person, it's different. Some people, I've talked to people that they've only had a visual addiction, which is really weird. Like, they never act on it, they never touch themselves, they just watch stuff, and it satisfies them mentally, which I don't understand. And I've also talked to people that have like, they've walked away from pornography completely, but they're still struggling with the physical addiction, sorry. And I don't understand that one either, because I had both. But understanding which one you're dealing with will give you a lot of insight in how to fight, because for some people it'll be very practical things, like don't put your phone next to bed at night, and take cold showers or whatever. And for other people it'll be different. So those small building blocks will come later, and I'll hopefully try to explain it, and maybe even interview other people that have seen success as well. But yeah, I want to end this with the message of saying that there is hope. There is a God who wants to know you. He does want to know you. He wants to convene, and he wants to show you his will for your life. And I strongly encourage you to be reconciled with him. I'm just an ambassador. It's Christ within me who's reaching out to you right now with the sign of hope, and that there is something greater in life. There is a freedom from sin. There is a victory. And that's something that I did not believe for a very long period of my life. I was raised in the church. I heard it a billion times, and it was like, oh, God can do anything. And in the back of my mind, I'd be like, oh yeah, except free me from blank. No, he can do it. He can. You just have to count the cost. You have to be ready to surrender things to him. Because if you're not ready to surrender things to him, he even says, like, hey, this is a crazy not dark, it's a hard to understand passage, but he says, if any man like looks back from the plow, he's not worthy of the kingdom of heaven, or something like that, implying that, yeah, you have to count the cost and realize that you have to give things up if you want to walk in freedom. It won't be easy, but it's possible. There is a community of people that will support you in doing it. That's another crucial step that I'll probably talk on later, repentance and having someone hold you accountable that's in person. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, I all I can say is that there's a YouTuber I watch. His name is Captain Sinbad, but he says greatness is coming, and that's all. Like, that's one of the phrases that I repeat to myself a lot. I wrote it on my wall back like in the beginning of the year when I was trying to do like 100 push-ups every day. But the reality is that greatness is coming if you believe that and if you act on it. And if those two things are true, I'm going to be completely honest with you, you'll be in a place that you cannot recognize in the future because of how far God takes you. So, yeah, I'm sorry if I'm being long-winded. Like I said, I kind of go on these trains of thought. But this is Luke, ending the long-winded first video of the channel, YouTube channel, whatever I'm posting this on. So, see y'all later.